Hello, welcome to Central Florida Salute YouTube. I'm once again at the Eagles, back home from my trip overseas, and I have a radar operator, radar man. His name is Jack Henschel, right?
That's pretty close, yes.
Pretty close. I'm doing good if I'm pretty close.
Henschel.
Henschel, Jack Henschel. Jack, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where were you born?
I was born in Princeton, Minnesota in 1933.
And you graduated from high school?
I graduated from high school there, and when I was 18, I went in the Navy, and that's the last I lived in Minnesota, or rather in Princeton, where I was born.
When you came out, you went somewhere else, huh?
When I came out, I went to school and got married and moved to a town called White Bear Lake in Minnesota.
Oh, okay. So you still stayed in Minnesota?
I still stayed in Minnesota until I retired completely about a year and a half, 2 years ago.
All right. Well, tell me something a little bit about yourself. When you first went into service, you went into Guard, is that correct?
I was in the National Guard for about 9 months, at which time I was still in high school, and the Minnesota National Guard pulled out, or got pulled for active duty in the Korean War, and I was discharged at that time so I could finish high school. And in August of the same year, I enlisted in my Navy.
Okay, well, why the Navy? I mean, from what I have on you is you have some brothers who were in the Army, right?
I had 3 brothers in the Army, and I just wasn't impressed with crawling around in the mud, so I joined the Navy.
So you could swim in the ocean.
Yeah.
Okay, well, tell me a little bit about your brothers. They World War II?
My oldest brother was in World War II in the Signal Corps, and he served in the Pacific, South Pacific. And when he was discharged, he joined the National Guard, and he worked his way up to second lieutenant. And the other 2 brothers were new to the game. They got involved in the Korean thing.
Mm-hmm. So tell me, you were in Waukegan, Illinois? Is that where
Waukegan, Illinois is where the Great Lakes Naval Training Station is, and that's boot camp for the inductees.
That's 14 weeks?
As I recall, it was about 14 weeks.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Are you a good swimmer?
No.
No?
No.
I'll tell you, I almost joined the Navy. I almost drowned when I was like 7 years old, and it didn't seem to be a good fit for me.
Well, you see, we spent very little time swimming. It was mostly above water.
Well, that's good. That's good. So your first choice was a radar man. Your second choice was an electrician, correct?
That's right.
What made you want to be a radar man?
Seemed like a good idea at the time.
Okay. But you had to take an aptitude test, and I gather you did rather well from what I read.
Yeah, I did. I was lucky. I apparently didn't have an awful lot of competition.
Well, still, came in third.
Something like that.
Yeah. So you had a lot of deployments. You were attached in Norfolk, Virginia, right?
Yeah, I went to Norfolk, Virginia for radar school. And after that, I transferred to the Miller DD 535 And that's where I was the rest of the enlistment.
Yeah, the Miller's a destroyer, right?
That's right.
When the fleet goes out, how many ships normally go out? And then where is the destroyer in relationship to the other?
At that time, a destroyer squadron consisted of 8 ships. And the one I was on was the flagship of my squadron, which was Destroyer Squadron 20. And we operated usually with 20.1, which was the first 4. At times we operated with all 8 of them. But the squadron size, I believe, was typically 8 ships.
And they weren't all destroyers, right?
Yeah, they were all Fletcher class,
Oh yeah.
which is the same size that I was on. The Fletcher class had a number of different setups, so to speak. The original Fletcher had 5-inch 38 caliber guns. We had 4. They removed one gun to install a fire control system. And so they weren't all the same. Some had 5 torpedoes, some had 10. Some had 40 millimeters, we had 3-inch 50s. They just weren't all the same. The hull was the same, but the equipment that they carried may vary.
Yeah. How many people served on ship?
There were 321. We had a few extra because we could carry the flag, the Commodore that was in control of all 8.
You know, I heard, and I don't know if this is true, but I heard that the merchant mariners or merchant marines, however you want to, to address them, they don't get VA benefits unless they served on a flagship.
I have no idea.
You didn't have any on this.
I would guess that if they served...
That's probably World War II.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But when you left Norwalk, Norfolk, pardon me. I'm from Connecticut, there's a town called Norwalk. But anyway, when you left Norfolk, you had a 2-month shakedown. What does that mean? Cruise to...
The ship had been in mothballs from the end of the Second World War until they pulled it out for Korean duty. And it was necessary to find out if everything worked. So we went to, the ship was on the West Coast when it was in mothballs, and they took it out of mothballs, brought it over to the East Coast, and it had a brand new crew that was totally unfamiliar with working with each other, and it was a matter of going on this shakedown cruise to familiarize ourselves with the way it operated.
Yeah, and get to know everybody on
Yeah, it's nice to have people that have an idea of what they're supposed to do,
Yeah, it's always a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that you found any problems with the ship? Tell me about the Miller. You took it to New Jersey and you loaded some supplies and ammos. Is that right?
We took on food and fuel in Brooklyn, as I recall, and we went to New Jersey to an ammo pier and loaded the ship with ammunition. That was before we went to Korea.
Yeah. So that was primarily one of the functions to get the stuff over there to Korea, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a little thing called a war going on. It's still going on technically, right?
yes.
But, yeah. How about Japan? You went to from what I understand, you went to Japan.
We operated out of Sasebo, which was a city toward the southern end of Japan. And we took a weekend, went up to Yokosuka, and I went up to Tokyo from Yokosuka. It wasn't all war. It was some fun and games. And it was a good visit.
Mm-hmm. You had to go through the Panama Canal, I understand, right?
Oh, yes.
What's that like? I've seen that,
That is a very interesting trip. The ability to build this thing in the first place was awe-inspiring. You could see up the side of the mountains where the holes were bored to put in dynamite. And it was really, really impressive. Another thing that impressed me was that I had a t-shirt on that day and got my back blistered, in spite of the fact that it was overcast. So,
wow.
it's crazy.
Yeah, that hot, huh? And you had to make a stop in Guantanamo Bay, according to my notes. Do a little repair.
When we left Newport on the start of this trip, we barely got out of port and sprung a leak in one of the condensers, as I recall. We ended up going on one screw down to Gitmo. And there they had visions of repairing this, which didn't work out. And so we went from there to Panama City, and they got it fixed. But we went on one propeller all the way down the East Coast.
So you made a lot of stops, huh?
Oh, yeah. We stopped in San Diego. We stopped at Pearl Harbor, Midway Island. The next stop was Sasebo, Japan. We made many, many more stops on the way back.
When you stopped at Pearl Harbor, did you get a chance to see the museum and all that?
No.
No. That's supposed to be quite impressive, Then you went by there and you're on your way to Midway, huh?
Yep.
And you were in Japan. It was a Japanese facility?
Yes.
Tell me about it.
It was the United States had a base there. And I remember the restaurant that we ate at was called the Lorraine Club. And you could go in that place and get good food for very little money. The Japanese people were very nice and very kind to us. I enjoyed shopping in Sasebo. It was really an interesting trip. We took bicycles one weekend out into the mountains. And I got to see a lot of the farming area. It was very interesting.
How long were you out there?
We operated in and out of Sasebo all the while we were over in Korea. We'd come back we'd take a trip to the Korean waters for 2 weeks or a month, and then come back to Sasebo to replenish and have rest and relaxation.
Yeah, from what I understand, that place was military base for many of the Navy vessels involved in the war. It must have been quite huge, huh?
It was fairly good size. The Japanese obviously used it during the Second World War. We didn't.
Yeah. I was, if we
They
did,
owned
if,
it
they,
at
if
the
we
time.
did, they didn't want us there, right?
They owned it at the time.
Yeah. What is this about conducting shelling of railroad mountain tunnels?
Well, there was a railroad that ran from China down to North Korea. And you have to understand what the landscape of North Korea is like. It's very mountainous.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to run a rail line along the beach, they had to bore a lot of holes for tunnels. And what we would do was go in with our 5-inch and 3-inch and cave in the top of the tunnel so that the train couldn't go through. But it turns out that once this was done and we had turned our fantail to the beach and moved out, they'd be out with wheelbarrows and pickaxes and they'd have it all fixed up. Didn't take them long.
Yeah. And you also, this is what I was getting back to before, because I heard that the destroyers escort aircraft carriers,
Yes, they do.
and you did some of that.
The name of the game is to follow the aircraft carrier when they're launching and recovering aircraft. In the rare event that one of them screws up and ends up in the drink, it would be our job to pick them up. Strangely enough, we never had to retrieve anybody during the time we were on that duty. The aircraft carriers that we worked with were, as I recall, the Bonhomme Richard, the Coral Sea, and the Kearsarge. The Kearsarge and the Bonhomme Richard were flying Corsairs, and the Coral Sea, which was bigger, had jets. I believe they were Panthers.
What's assisted the USS Hannah?
The Hannah was a destroyer escort that was apparently doing shore fire. I didn't get the details for how it got into this mishap, but the people on the beach, Koreans, didn't like it, and they fired back, and they put a couple rounds into the forward part of the ship, into the boiler, as I recall. Anyhow, they ran out of fresh water because they couldn't make it anymore, and we gave them a bunch of fresh water. And that was the extent of it. When we were there, they were busy patching the hole in the side of the hull.
You also talked about having to abort a mission because of 30-foot waves.
We were called upon, because we were the flagship, to deliver an admiral by the name of Gingrich to the battleship Missouri, which was parked in Wonsan Harbor. And that's fine. So we left Sasso, Japan with this admiral and steamed west toward the Sea of Japan. And before we got to the Sea of Japan, it was announced over the public address that we should close and lock, or close and fasten down all the watertight doors and hatches, because it was going to be rough, and we should tie down anything that was loose. So we got into the Sea of Japan and found that there was a wind coming down from the north, and this wind had, if you look at the map, Sea of Japan goes way up north, and this provided a long distance for the waves build up. And the wind was 80 knots. We were doing 25 knots into this.
You weren't getting very far then.
Well, we were making it, but it was beating up the ship.
Yeah.
I got seasick, which I didn't do very often, and went back to my bunk and tried to sleep it out. Along toward midnight or thereabouts, the captain, I expect, said, "This is enough." And he turned the ship around. Well, when we turned around, we took a 57-degree roll, which is kind of severe. And then we had the wind at our tail, and it wasn't so bad anymore. But there were 30-foot waves. If you can imagine waves as tall as your telephone poles out in front of the house, that's what it was.
Yeah, well, a story, a building 3 stories high would be equivalent to about 30 feet. So if you're standing at a building looking up to the 3rd floor, you're looking at a wave coming at you. That's another reason I didn't join the Navy.
But oddly enough, I was aboard that ship for over 3 years, and that was the only bad storm we ran into during all that time.
And that was enough.
That was enough.
Yeah. Let me ask you, of all the stops you've made, I see you were also in Italy. How many different countries do you think you were in, and what was your favorites?
Somewhere in the neighborhood of 24.
Wow.
I enjoyed Italy. I enjoyed Spain. I enjoyed Portugal, France. It was interesting in Rangoon, Burma. We got to go to a lot of different places. And of course, I liked Japan. A lot of guys did.
Well, they say if you want to join the Navy, you're supposed to see the world, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I guess you did. But you did 4 years, right? How many years you do?
I was in for 4.
4. So let me ask you an obvious question. You didn't want to enlist? Re-enlist?
No, I didn't. There were a number of reasons. The pay was not very good. I was in pay grade E6, and at that time I was getting $225 a month with sea pay. You can't live on that.
Well, yeah, this is 1953, right?
Right. Well, times have changed, obviously. I wasn't thrilled with going out to sea all the time. And also in the military, you can get killed.
That's the way it goes.
So I opted to get out. I had a chance.
Yeah. Well, you got out, you got married, and you have a family. And
Yeah, I'm glad I got out.
I know your lovely daughter, and she happens to live next door to me. But I know her husband too, so. But anyway, he's laughing at me over there.
Yeah. If I were young, I would probably join the Navy again.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, a lot of people who did it 4 years, like myself. I was in the Air Force for 4 years. I got out because I got tired of being sent overseas, and it was the middle of Vietnam, and leaves didn't, you couldn't get a leave. It was the mission, and I got tired of it, and I said, I'm going to retire I'll leave the military. And it was a great thing, though, being in the service, and you'll have to agree with me on this. It opens up doors for you when you get out.
Yeah.
People will want to hire veterans because they know they've been disciplined and they've matured. And I think I think everybody should do some military service.
Not everybody can say they have been around the world before they were 20 years old. I can.
Yeah, that's great. So, well, anyway, so you would recommend a young person look into joining a branch of the service?
Yep.
And I would too. I would like to see, especially our politicians, I'd like to see them go to at least 2 years of military.
You really got a mean streak.
I do, don't I? Yeah. Well, you know, I believe that everybody should do some military service. If you cannot do that, there's the Peace Corps. There's other options you can do for our country. And, you know, but that's me.
Well, you know, if you put the politicians in the military for a while, they might get the idea that this war stuff, it kind of sucks.
Very well put, and I think we're going to end it there because we are not political, and we don't want to get political, but I think service, military service or volunteer service, Peace Corps, something like that, is great for any young person to mature, you know, and I'm going to leave it at that.
Yep.
But I want to thank you. How old are you now?
I'm 90.
90. God bless you, sir. Do you have anything you'd like to tell our viewers before we go? Any comments?
Well, not really.
Okay, well then we'll say goodbye. And I told you how we're going to do this, remember? We're going to look right over there in that camera. So all our veterans out there, active military and their families, we salute you for all you do. Till next time.